I built that restaurant with my own 2 hands. Every beam, every nail, every greasy booth where truckers slumped down after midnight. My sweat held it together. 27 years of busted knuckles and long nights, just to keep the lights on. Folks passing through called it Miller's Stop. And for me, it was more than a stop. It was home. My kids never saw it that way. They called it small, old, a loser's diner. They wanted shiny offices, fast money, the kind that comes with suits and air-conditioned jobs. They thought I was stuck in the mud, wasting my life serving burgers to drifters. But when the numbers finally turned good, when the diner started pulling real profit, they showed up like vultures. "Dad, you can't keep running this place alone," my son Mark said one night, sliding a stack of papers across the counter. He wore that fake smile, the one that never reached his eyes. "We'll help. All you have to do is sign. Just tax forms. Routine." My daughter, Lila, leaned on the stool beside him, arms crossed. "We're looking out for you. You're not getting younger. You can barely stand on your feet 8 hours." I remember the sound of the fryer hissing behind me, the jukebox humming some sad tune from the 80s. My hands smelled of onions and bleach. I looked at those papers, the black ink swimming on the white. My head was tired, my heart heavier, and like a fool, I signed. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It crept. Suddenly, the supplier called and said my name wasn't on the account anymore. Then the bank phoned. Same thing with the loan. Finally, the county clerk's office mailed a notice. Ownership transfer complete. Ownership transfer. That was the phrase that split my chest wide open. They hadn't helped me. They'd stolen from me. Everything, restaurant, land, name, now belonged to them. I drove by one evening, headlights off, parked across the road. The neon sign still flickered Miller's Stop, but the windows were full of fresh paint and glossy posters. My kids stood inside with a crowd, laughing, shaking hands, like they'd earned it, like they'd built it brick by brick. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. I didn't storm in, didn't shout, didn't break their glass and flip their tables. No, that would have been easy. Too easy for them to dismiss as Dad losing it. I chose silence. Cold, sharp silence. Because silence gives you time to sharpen your knives. I left town for a while. Slept in a friend's old trailer by the lake. Days were quiet, nights long. But in that silence, I made a plan. You see, the diner was profitable, but it wasn't squeaky clean. Mark and Lila were already cutting corners. Cheap meat suppliers, shady cash skimming, cash tips never reported. My son had always been cocky, flashing money he didn't earn. My daughter loved to talk about expansion, but never understood the cost. I knew they'd trip themselves up. All I had to do was set the trap. So I called up an old friend, Carl Dawson, now a state inspector. Back in the day, I'd pulled him out of a mess when a developer tried to cheat him. He owed me, and Carl never forgot debts. "Tom," he said on the phone, his voice gravelly, "you sure you want to go down this road?" "They took everything, Carl," I said. "I'll take it back. And I want them to feel it, not just in their wallets, in their names." There was a pause. Then, "Send me what you've got. We'll dig." Weeks passed. I played the patient ghost, out of sight, but never out of mind. Every receipt, every rumor, every late-night delivery truck, they all told a story. And Carl's team listened. I could see it building. A net tightening, slow and steady. My kids thought they were untouchable. They bragged about modernizing the place, throwing launch parties, inviting half the town. And that's when I knew the time was perfect. The night of the grand reopening came. Balloons tied to the porch rail. Bright lights. Music blasting. Guests in suits. Local big shots shaking hands. My kids on the porch with microphones, smiling wide like politicians. I parked across the street again. Different this time. I wasn't the broken man in the dark anymore. I was the storm waiting on the horizon. Inside, champagne glasses clinked. My son raised his glass, voice booming through the speakers, to the future of Miller's Stop. And just then, the sirens wailed. Not music, not applause. Sirens. Cruisers pulled up, lights flashing red and blue across the white paint of the diner. Inspectors followed, badges out. Carl stepped out last, clipboard in hand. I watched from the shadows, a slow smile spreading across my face. Because revenge doesn't always come with fists. Sometimes it comes with paperwork and handcuffs. And this was only the beginning. The flashing red and blue lit up the night like a carnival, except nobody was laughing anymore. Guests froze with champagne flutes halfway to their lips. Lila's smile collapsed first, slipping off her face like wet paint. Mark tried to laugh, to wave it off. Just a routine check, folks. Nothing to worry about. But his voice cracked under the weight of panic. Carl stepped up the porch with that steady walk only lawmen and inspectors have. Clipboard in hand, badge clipped to his belt. Mark Miller? Lila Miller? His voice carried through the speakers, still buzzing from their reopening speech. Yeah. Mark tried to sound casual, but his hand tightened around the microphone stand. You're under investigation for multiple violations, tax evasion, health code breaches, and suspected financial fraud. The words hit like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few guests set down their drinks and slipped toward the door, not wanting their names tied to scandal. Lila stepped forward, trembling but defiant. You can't just barge in here like this. This is private property. Carl didn't flinch. Not when there's probable cause. He nodded, and inspectors swept inside, snapping photos, pulling open freezer doors, checking receipts. Deputies moved in behind them, firm and silent. I leaned against my truck across the road, arms crossed, watching it all unravel. Every tick of the clock, every flash of a camera inside that diner, felt like payback stitched together in real time. By midnight, the music had stopped. The guests were gone. My children stood pale and cornered as Carl read off a list of citations so long it made my head spin, and I already knew half of it. Unreported income, Carl read. Overdue payroll taxes. Expired permits. Supplier invoices from unlicensed vendors. He paused, eyes hard. And more. Plenty more. Mark tried to speak. His voice cracked. This is a mistake. Somebody set us up. I almost laughed out loud from across the street. Because that's exactly what I had done. The next morning, the diner's grand reopening was the front page of the Gazette, but not the way my kids planned. Miller's stop shut down. Owners under investigation. The photo showed Lila covering her face while deputies loaded boxes of receipts into cruisers. Mark glaring into the lens, sweat shining on his forehead. At the diner, the doors were padlocked, a big orange notice slapped across the glass. Closed until further notice. I sat at the counter of the town's other cafe, sipping burnt coffee, listening to the whispers around me. Can you believe it? One man muttered. After all that bragging, said another. They thought they were too smart to get caught. I stirred my coffee slow, pretending not to hear. But inside, I was burning, not with anger anymore, but with satisfaction. That evening, Mark showed up at my trailer. His fancy shoes were caked in mud, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He didn't bother knocking, just stormed up to my porch, his voice sharp and bitter. You did this, he shouted. You couldn't stand to see us succeed. So you dragged us down with you. I stepped out, cane in one hand, steady as stone. No, son. You dragged yourselves down. I just made sure everyone saw it happen. You're supposed to be our father, he spat. You're supposed to support us. I leaned in close, my voice low, clipped. I supported you every damn day of your lives. Gave you food, shelter, my back, my blood. And when it came time to honor that, you stole from me. You forgot who built this. He stared at me, eyes flicking like a trapped animal's. His jaw worked, but no words came out. Finally, he turned and stormed off into the night, tires spitting gravel as his car tore away. I stood there in the quiet, the frogs croaking by the lake, the cool wind brushing my face. For the first time in years, I felt something sharp and clear inside me. Control. But this wasn't over. The diner was shut down, yes. But I wanted more than shuttered doors and headlines. I wanted my children stripped of every false mask they wore, before the whole town, before each other, before themselves. And I knew exactly how to do it. By the end of that week, the whole town buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Everyone knew Miller's stop was closed. Everyone whispered about Mark and Lila's shady business. But whispers fade if you don't fan the fire. And I wasn't about to let the fire die. I went straight to Pete at the Gazette. He'd already run the front-page story about the shutdown, but I wanted more. Not just a headline, an expose. Something that carved their names into shame. Pete sat across from me, his typewriter idle, his coffee black. You sure, Tom? This'll finish them. Folks won't just side-eye them at the store. They'll cross the street when they see him. That's the point, I said, tapping my cane against his desk. They stripped me of my dignity once. Now I'll strip them of theirs. He leaned back, exhaled through his nose, and nodded. Give me the files. I slid Gary's folder across. Proof of fraud, shady suppliers, screenshots of texts where my kids bragged about finally taking the old man's money. Pete's eyebrows shot up as he skimmed. This isn't just dirt, he muttered. This is dynamite. 3 days later, the paper hit doorsteps with the headline, Millard children under fire, fraud, theft, and betrayal. The story didn't hold back. It laid out the timeline of their takeover, the forged signatures, the stolen accounts, the late-night shipments from unlicensed vendors. And then, at the bottom, Pete printed my own words, short, cold, impossible to misinterpret. I gave my children everything I had. They repaid me with betrayal. They will inherit nothing. I was at the diner that morning, not mine, the other cafe in town, when the paper landed on the counter. The whole place went still as folks read. A woman gasped, a man cursed under his breath. Heads shook, lips tightened. By the time Mark and Lila walked in, faces pale, they were already condemned. Out. The owner snapped, slamming the paper on the counter. You don't bring that stink into my place. They turned, stung, humiliated, every pair of eyes cutting into them. I sipped my coffee, silent in the corner, watching them scatter like cockroaches under light. Later that afternoon, Lila showed up at my trailer. Her car tires crunched over gravel. Her makeup smeared like she'd been crying for hours. She didn't knock, just stormed up to the porch, voice raw. Dad, how could you? I stepped out, steady on my cane. How could I? You forged my name. You tried to erase me. You mocked everything I built. This isn't me doing it, Lila. This is the truth catching up to you. Tears streaked her cheeks. We're your children. You stopped being my children the day you treated me like a corpse before I was in the ground. Her lip trembled. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then she turned, heels crunching against gravel, and drove away. That night, I stood on my porch, the lake black and still behind me. For the first time, the town didn't just pity me, they respected me again. Neighbors waved. Strangers nodded. Folks I hadn't spoken to in years stopped to say, good on you, Tom. About time someone stood up to them. But I knew my kids weren't done. Pride is a poison, and theirs was stronger than anything. They'd lash out again. They'd try to claw their way back. And when they did, I'd be ready with the next trap. The expose hit harder than I expected. For days, I couldn't walk down Main Street without someone tipping their hat or muttering, You showed him, Tom. Even the sheriff slapped my shoulder outside the post office. But for Mark and Lila, life turned into quicksand. Their business accounts froze. Suppliers cut them off. Old friends stopped answering calls. And worst of all for them, the town they thought they'd impress now treated them like diseased strays. Most folks would have stopped there. I didn't. Because shame fades. And I wanted their fall to be permanent. I met Gary one evening in the back booth of the diner. He slid a folder across the table, lowering his voice. Been digging deeper. Found unpaid loans in Mark's name. He borrowed against the restaurant months before you signed it over. Now that the diner's locked, the bank's circling. I flipped through the papers. Numbers, signatures, interest rates climbing like wildfire. How bad? Gary smirked. Bad enough the bank's ready to seize whatever assets he's got left. Which, let's face it, ain't much. And Lila? I asked. Credit cards maxed. She tried to start some consulting business. Never filed taxes, never paid vendors. She's one letter away from being sued. I closed the folder, my hand steady. Good. I want both of them stripped clean. No money. No property. Nothing to crawl back on. Gary raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. You're colder than I remember, Tom. Age doesn't soften everyone, I said. Sometimes it hardens us. The next morning, I went to see Patrick Lowe, the lawyer Graham had connected me with. His office smelled of paper and stale coffee. He looked at the folder, then at me. "You really want to go this far?" he asked. "They already took my name and nearly burned my life's work," I said. "Now I'll take theirs." Patrick leaned back, nodding slowly. "We'll contact the bank, the vendors, the tax office. With this evidence, we can force collections to hit fast. They'll be buried before they can blink." And that's exactly what happened. Within weeks, the walls closed in on them. Mark's fancy truck was repossessed, hauled out of his driveway in broad daylight. Neighbors watched from porches, whispering, shaking their heads. Lila's landlord slapped an eviction notice on her condo door, bold red letters screaming, "Pay or leave." I didn't need to gloat. The town did it for me. Everywhere they went, eyes followed. Whispers trailed them like smoke. And me? I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, cane across my knees, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. One night, though, they showed up together. My kids, standing in the gravel drive under the yellow porch light. Their faces hollow, their clothes wrinkled. Pride still in their eyes, but desperation in every line of their bodies. "Dad," Mark said, his voice raw, "you've made your point. We're broke. The diner's gone. Everyone hates us. Just stop." I stepped to the edge of the porch, my cane tapping wood. My voice came out cold, clipped. "You didn't just steal from me. You spit on everything I built. You thought I was too old, too blind, too weak to fight back. Now you know better." Lila's eyes shone with tears. "We're your children." I stared hard at them, silence stretching until even the crickets stopped chirping. Then I spoke. "You were my children, until the night you turned me into a corpse before I was in the ground." Their faces broke. For a second, I saw the scared kids they used to be. But pity dies quick when the knife's still in your back. "Go," I said, "before I decide to take even the clothes off your backs." They left, tires spitting gravel, taillights fading into the night. I stood there long after they were gone, the porch light buzzing overhead. My chest felt heavy, but not with regret. Because this wasn't the end. I'd taken their money. I'd taken their business. But I still had one move left. One strike that would make sure their names were ruined forever. And when I made it, there'd be no coming back. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Yes, their money was gone. Their truck repossessed. Their condo stripped bare. But money comes and goes. People forget debt. What I wanted was deeper, something they couldn't shake off even if they tried. I wanted their names to rot. That's when I remembered the town hall fundraiser. A big, shiny event held every year in the community center, where all the respectable folks paraded themselves in front of one another. The Millers had always shown up, me with grease on my hands from the diner, them with fake smiles. But this year, Mark and Lila planned to use it as their comeback. I'd heard the whispers. "Don't worry," Mark had told someone at the gas station. "We'll show everyone we're still in the game. Just a setback. We'll bounce back." Bounce back? Not on my watch. I called Pete at the Gazette again. "You want the biggest story of the year?" I asked. He chuckled. "Tom, you're becoming my best source of revenue. What V you got this time?" "Come to the fundraiser," I said. "Bring your photographer. And be ready to publish." Then I called Carl. He owed me more than one favor, and he liked watching liars squirm. "You want me to crash their little party?" he asked. "Not crash," I said. "Just walk in at the right time. With the right papers." The night of the fundraiser came. The community center was strung up with lights, the smell of catered food filling the hall. The town's mayor was there, the sheriff, half the business owners in the county. People in suits, dresses, fake laughs bouncing off the walls. And in the middle of it all, Mark and Lila. Shiny clothes, forced grins, acting like the storm hadn't torn their house apart. They shook hands, posed for photos, raised glasses like nothing had happened. I walked in late, wore my old gray suit, cane tapping against the polished floor. Heads turned, whispers rippled. I saw Mark's jaw tighten, Lila's smile falter. "Dad," Mark said loudly, so everyone could hear, "good to see you here. We were just telling everyone about the family legacy, how we'll rebuild the diner bigger and better." I raised my eyebrows. Legacy, bigger and better, lies slicker than oil. I didn't speak. Not yet. Timing is everything. That's when Carl walked in, badge visible, folder in hand. He didn't look at me. Didn't need to. He went straight to the microphone stand and cleared his throat. Sorry to interrupt, folks. But since the Millers are talking about their legacy, I think it's time everyone knows the truth. Gasps fluttered across the room. Mark's face drained. Lila shook her head, whispering, "No, no, no." Carl opened the folder, reading off charges like scripture. Fraud, forgery, tax evasion, supplier theft. Photos flashed from Pete's photographer, papers projected on the wall behind him. The crowd turned. Faces once smiling, now twisted with disgust. Friends they'd known since high school shook their heads, whispers turning sharp. Someone even spat on the floor. Mark tried to grab the mic. "This is slander. It's lies." I finally stepped forward, my cane clicking on the floor. My voice carried, cold and sharp. "Not lies. Truth. And the proof's right there. You thought you could steal from me, bury me, wear my name like a crown. But tonight, everyone sees what you really are." Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Then the sheriff stepped in from the back, cuffs ready. "Mark, Lila, you're coming with me." The hall erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Phones snapping photos. My children, dragged out under the lights, faces pale, eyes wide, their hands locked in steel. I stood tall in that silence, the crowd's eyes on me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Didn't feel forgotten. I felt like justice itself. But as I walked out into the cold night, I knew there was still one final move to make. One last strike that would bury them for good, not just in this town, but everywhere their names reached. And I already knew how to deliver it. The fundraiser fallout was brutal. By morning, every phone in town buzzed with the photos. Mark and Lila in handcuffs, heads down, dragged through the community center like criminals at a parade. Pete's Gazette headline screamed, "Miller children exposed, legacy in ruins." Copies of the paper plastered shop windows. Folks folded it under their arms at the gas station, shaking their heads, muttering, "Can you believe it? Tom's kids did all that." And that was exactly what I wanted. But not all I wanted. Because shame fades, and a jail cell is only temporary. I wanted their names blacklisted permanently. I met Patrick Lowe, the lawyer, at his office again. His place smelled of dust and old leather. He glanced at me over his glasses. "You've already stripped them of money, business, and reputation. What's left, Tom?" I leaned forward on my cane, eyes sharp. "Reach. They still think they can leave town, move somewhere else, start fresh. I want to make sure wherever they go, their past follows." Patrick tapped a pen against his notepad. "Then we take this beyond town lines. File formal complaints with the state. Push for criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, tax evasion. They'll be lucky if they can open a lemonade stand when we're done." "Do it," I said, "and make it loud." The machine started grinding. Patrick drafted letters, filed charges. Carl's inspection reports turned into affidavits. Gary's evidence got notarized and copied. And Pete? He sent the story to bigger papers, the kind that circulate across the state. Within a week, the headlines weren't just local. Miller's siblings face fraud charges, family legacy shattered. Once promising entrepreneurs now under investigation. Even the evening news ran a segment, cameras flashing Mark and Lila's mugshots across living rooms statewide. The calls started coming. Old friends, business contacts, anyone they'd ever tried to charm, gone. Banks flagged their names. Landlords slammed doors. Employers laughed them out of interviews. Everywhere they turned, their last name was poison. I knew it worked when I heard from Maria, the bank clerk I'd known for years. She leaned across the counter, whispering, "Mark came in yesterday, trying to open an account. We told him flat out, Miller? Not a chance." I walked out of that bank lighter than I'd felt in years. But the real moment came at the next town council meeting. The chamber was full, neighbors, business owners, half the county. Mark and Lila slunk in, pale and desperate, trying to plead their case. "We've learned our lesson," Lila said, her voice cracking. "We just want a chance to rebuild, to contribute." I stood from the back row, cane steady, voice sharp. "Rebuild? You burned your chance to the ground. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from this town. Every dollar skimmed, every lie told, every shortcut taken. You spat on the people who trusted you. The room went still. Dozens of faces turned their backs on my children, literally, neighbors shifting in their seats to deny them even eye contact. That cut deeper than any jail sentence. When the meeting adjourned, I walked out slow into the cool night. The courthouse bell chimed in the distance, steady as my cane against the pavement. Behind me, I could hear my children's voices breaking, begging for someone, anyone, to listen. But no one did. I didn't even turn around. On my porch that night, I poured myself a black coffee, the air cold enough to bite. I looked out at the lake, calm and dark, and felt something heavy lift from my chest. I'd taken their money, their business, their reputation. Now I'd taken their future. And for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. But deep down, I knew there was one final strike left. Something that would close the circle forever. Not just punishment, closure. And I was ready for it. The lake was still that morning, mirror flat under a gray sky. I sat on the porch with my coffee, cane resting against my knee, thinking about the last card I had left to play. Money? Gone. Reputation? Ruined. Future? Poisoned. But they still had one thing left, a roof. That shabby little house they were squatting in, clinging to it like shipwrecked rats on driftwood. I couldn't leave it at that. Not after everything. I called Gary. Find out who actually owns that place. By evening, he had the papers spread on my kitchen table. Not them. Belongs to a bank in the city. They've been living on extensions, late fees piled to the ceiling. Any day now, the bank could pull the plug. I traced a finger across the document, the black ink neat and merciless. Let's help the bank make up its mind. The eviction came fast. Sheriff's deputies pulled up, lights flashing not because they had to, but because shame works better under a spotlight. Neighbors came out, arms folded, watching from their lawns. Mark and Lila stumbled onto the porch, shouting, waving their arms. You can't do this. This is our home. The deputy shoved a paper at them. Not anymore. Court says otherwise. Boxes hit the curb. Mattresses leaned against the railing. Their clothes spilled out of garbage bags, fluttering in the wind like dirty flags. I arrived slow, leaning on my cane, standing across the street by my truck. Silent. Watching. Mark spotted me, his face twisted red. You, he screamed, voice cracking. You did this. You ruined us. I didn't move. Just stood there, the wind tugging at my coat, eyes steady as stone. You ruined yourselves, I said finally, loud enough for everyone to hear. The day you betrayed your own father, you set fire to your future. I just let the flames spread. The neighbors murmured. Some nodded. One man even clapped once, sharp and final. Lila broke then, tears streaking her face, collapsing onto the curb beside a pile of broken furniture. Mark stood frozen, fists clenched, but no fight left in him. Deputies dragged them down the porch, past the crowd, past me. They couldn't meet my eyes. I walked back to my truck slow, cane tapping against the pavement. Before climbing in, I turned and spoke the last words they'd hear from me. You mocked my work, called me worthless, stole my name. Now look around you. This, I pointed at the pile of trash, at the crowd of neighbors watching. This is all you've got left. Then I drove away, their figures shrinking in the mirror, small and hollow under the weight of their own choices. That night, I sat in my rebuilt library. The shelves weren't full anymore, but the books that survived stood proud. I pulled one down, pages yellow but strong, and thought of my wife. They laughed at your books, I whispered, but those books outlasted them. And I smiled. Slow. Cold. Final. The house was gone. The money was gone. Their names were poisoned in every diner, bank, and church pew from here to the city. But there was still one thing left for me to do, the last nail in the coffin. I sat at my desk in the quiet library, the smell of old paper steady around me. My will lay open on the table. The old one was ashes, shredded with every trace of their names erased. The new one sat crisp and clean, notarized, unshakable. I wrote a final letter, to be read when I was gone. Not for them, oh no, for the town, for the people who stood by me when my own blood turned traitor. In that letter I explained, plain as a hammer blow. My children tried to rob me while I lived. My grandchildren mocked the work I built. They inherit nothing. The ones who inherit are the people who stood beside me, the neighbors, the friends, the honest hands who helped me rebuild. That letter would live on longer than I would. A reminder, a scar on their name forever. The next week, I called Pete from the Gazette, handed him the sealed copy. When the time comes, I said, print this. Let the world see it. Don't let them rewrite the story after I'm gone. He nodded, eyes heavy but certain. They'll never escape it, Tom. Good, I said. That's the point. 2 days later, I passed them on Main Street. Mark and Lila, clothes wrinkled, eyes hollow, walking like shadows. They didn't look at me. Couldn't. People crossed the road to avoid them. Whispers followed like dogs nipping at their heels. I slowed my step, leaned hard on my cane, and spoke just loud enough for them to hear. You wanted everything I built. Now you've got nothing. And that's all you'll ever have. They froze, shoulders stiff, but never turned. They just kept walking, heads bowed, ghosts of their own making. That night, I poured myself a black coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the lake catch fire under the setting sun. My heart was steady. My hands, for once, didn't shake. Because revenge wasn't fire or fists. It was patience. It was truth. It was making sure the ones who betrayed you lived every day in the ashes they made for themselves. I took a long sip, felt the bitterness on my tongue, and smiled. They thought I was too old to fight back. I whispered to the wind. Then I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the horizon, and let the last words slip out, cold and sharp, the only epitaph they'd ever deserve. Now they'll be remembered for nothing,